In this video, we're heading down to one of the most vibrant yet gritty cities in America, New Orleans. You probably know the city for its famous Mardi Gras celebrations, jazz music, and of course, its rich cultural heritage. But there's a side of New Orleans that rarely gets the spotlight. The streets, the hustlers, and the fierce rivalries that have shaped the city's music, culture, and even its reputation. New Orleans isn't just a city, it's an entity that has been influenced by centuries of history, conflict, and resilience. So sit tight as we take a deeper dive into the underworld of New Orleans and explore its most infamous areas, the Third Ward, and the fierce battles that came to define its streets. While Baton Rouge, Louisiana, has already been explored in previous episodes, it only makes sense to now shift our focus to its more notorious neighbor, New Orleans. Despite being just an hour away from Baton Rouge, these two cities couldn't be more different. Baton Rouge might be a state capital, but New Orleans, with its distinct mix of French, Spanish, and African American culture, is a symbol of Louisiana's identity. To understand the complex dynamic of New Orleans, we need to go back in time, right to the moment the city was founded. How did it go from a French colonial port to an economic powerhouse? And what went wrong during the 20th century that changed the city's fortunes? Founded in 1718 by French colonists, New Orleans is one of America's oldest cities, with its earliest days marked by complex cultural intermingling. The city's strategic location at the mouth of the Mississippi River attracted settlers from all over the world. The French were the first to colonize the area, followed by the Spanish and later, a sizable African American population who were brought in through the slave trade. Over time, these different groups blended their customs, languages, and beliefs to create what we now call Creole culture. What makes New Orleans unique is that it became a place where diverse ethnic groups didn't just live together, they shared and influenced each other's way of life. The city became a cultural hub, blending French, Spanish, West African, and Native American traditions to create something entirely new. The food, music, and art that came from this melting pot set the tone for the city's future. The city's Creole identity laid the foundation for New Orleans' distinct cultural sound, one that would later come to shape the American music scene. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. By the early 1800s, New Orleans was thriving. It became one of the wealthiest cities in the U.S. thanks to its location along the Mississippi River, which made it a critical port for international trade. With access to goods from Europe, Africa, and the Caribbean, New Orleans became the center of commerce for much of the American South. Cotton, sugar, and tobacco were major exports, while the river provided a constant influx of wealth. However, all this prosperity came with a price. While New Orleans grew into a bustling city full of lavish mansions and a thriving middle class, the underbelly of the city, particularly in the poorer districts, was struggling. Native American tribes had warned European settlers that the land was prone to flooding, but those warnings went unheeded. Over the years, these floods would wreak havoc on the city, and by the mid-20th century, the city's infrastructure was starting to crack under pressure. The decline begins. The late 1960s. In the mid-1900s, things began to take a sharp turn for the worse. As the U.S. economy changed, so did the importance of New Orleans. The growth of automobiles, trains, and airplanes meant that the city's once thriving port was no longer as vital to the nation's transportation network. The industrial boom that had once supported the city began to wane. By the late 1960s, the city's infrastructure was crumbling, and many businesses began closing their doors. The rising tide of crime was another major issue. New Orleans, once a beacon of prosperity, was rapidly becoming one of the most dangerous cities in America. By the early 1970s, the population began to decline as residents fled to nearby suburbs in search of safer environments and better opportunities. New Orleans is divided into 17 wards, each with its own unique identity, but none as notorious as the Third Ward. Within this ward lie some of the most dangerous and legendary projects in the city. The Magnolia, the Cali Oak, and the Melfament, often just referred to as the Melf. The Third Ward became the heart of New Orleans street culture, where young men and women grew up in the shadow of poverty, crime, and urban decay. The conditions in these neighborhoods were often deplorable. The projects were overcrowded, with insufficient public services, high crime rates, and limited opportunities for young people. For many, the only way to survive was to get involved in the street economy, and that led to the rise of powerful figures who controlled everything from drug trade to local rackets. By the 1980s, New Orleans' most notorious street rivalry had been established. The rivalry between the Magnolia projects and the Cali Oak projects. The Magnolia, located in the heart of the Third Ward, was known for its harsh conditions, but it also produced some of the most powerful figures in New Orleans street culture. The Cali Oak projects, located just a few blocks away, was equally infamous for its criminal activity, deteriorating buildings, and the wild, lawless atmosphere that characterized it. But while both projects had their own gang leaders, it wasn't just about turf wars. It was about respect, power, and dominance in a city that had few opportunities for anyone to make it big. The Calliope and Magnolia crews would constantly clash, with violence erupting over territory and control of the lucrative street economy. Despite their differences, both projects shared a common bond: poverty, hardship, and the constant fight to survive. In the heart of New Orleans' Third Ward, amidst the ongoing violence and shifting allegiances, one name consistently stood out: Sam Scully. Also known as Sam Clay, he became an almost mythical figure in the Cali Oak projects, often referred to as the godfather of the neighborhood. Born and raised in the gritty streets of New Orleans, Scully was no stranger to adversity. The city itself was a battleground of racial tension, economic hardship, and entrenched poverty. Yet, for Scully, this environment would become the foundation for his rise to power. What truly set Sam Scully apart from other street hustlers was his combination of intelligence, strategic thinking, and raw ambition. In a city where the hustle could either lead to success or death, Scully's focus wasn't just about making quick money. It was about building an empire. He understood that to really thrive, you had to control territory. And in New Orleans, control over territory meant control over the flow of money, drugs, and influence. Scully's ascent to power was nothing short of remarkable. In just 3 years, he turned a small, relatively unknown operation into a multi-million-dollar empire. This wasn't due to blind luck or brute force. Scully was a mastermind. He studied his environment, made calculated moves, and built connections across the city. He was known for his ability to navigate the dangerous, competitive world of street-level business with a combination of street smarts and diplomatic savvy. While many of his competitors relied on force and intimidation, Scully knew when to use those tactics and when to employ more subtle methods of control. Scully wasn't the only person to come from the streets of New Orleans and rise to prominence. One of the most successful figures to emerge from the Third Ward was Percy Miller, better known as Master P. Percy was a talented basketball player with dreams of making it to the NBA, but after a career-ending injury, he shifted his focus to music. Master P wasn't just a rapper. He was an entrepreneur who would change the landscape of Southern rap forever. With a $10,000 inheritance from his grandfather, Master P moved to California and founded No Limit Records. He learned the ropes of the music industry and soon began to sign local talent, including artists from the rival Magnolia projects. His willingness to break street boundaries for the sake of business led to No Limit's rise to prominence, eventually becoming one of the most powerful independent labels in the world. By the time Master P returned to New Orleans in the mid-1990s, he had developed a unique and fresh approach to the music industry that set him apart from his contemporaries. While much of West Coast rap was focused on complex lyricism and the smooth, polished sound of mainstream rap, Southern rap, and particularly the New Orleans scene, thrived on heavy bass, catchy hooks, and raw, gritty storytelling. Master P recognized the potential to revolutionize the industry, not just as a rapper, but as a savvy businessman. His first big move was signing Soulja Slim, a rising star from the rival Magnolia projects, defying the traditional street loyalties that often kept artists from working together. This move was a calculated risk, but it paid off. Master P's ability to blend street credibility with his entrepreneurial vision allowed No Limit Records to carve out its own niche, rapidly building an empire that produced hit after hit. Master P became a household name, and No Limit Records became a powerhouse in the rap world, with its signature No Limit Tank logo becoming synonymous with success. Beyond just music, Master P expanded the brand into movies, clothing, and other ventures, showing the world that there was much more to No Limit than just rap albums. His hustle wasn't just about the music. It was about creating an entire culture that could endure and expand far beyond the streets of New Orleans. But No Limit wasn't the only major label coming out of New Orleans. In the Magnolia projects, a new label had emerged, Cash Money Records, founded by Brian Williams, better known as Birdman. Cash Money quickly became a major player in the rap game, signing artists like Juvenile, Lil Wayne, and BG. As the two labels battled for supremacy, they would help define the sound of Southern hip-hop and the cultural identity of New Orleans. The rivalry between No Limit and Cash Money was fierce, but it wasn't just about the music. It was about loyalty, turf, and pride. The Magnolia and the Cali Oak, despite being part of the same city, were caught in a deadly game of one-upmanship that had its roots in the streets. Artists from both labels stayed closely tied to their neighborhoods. The rivalry between the Magnolia and Cali Oak projects was more than just a territorial dispute. It was a battle for respect and survival in a city where the odds were stacked against you from birth. These neighborhoods, though mere blocks apart, represented two different approaches to navigating the chaos of New Orleans' underworld. The Magnolia, home to some of the most notorious figures in the city's history, was known for its fierce loyalty to the streets and its tight-knit community. The conflict wasn't just about control over drug turf or street corners, but about proving dominance in a society that had long abandoned these areas to their own devices. Tensions would often spill over into violent clashes, not just between gangs, but also between the families that called these areas home. As the years passed, the rivalry only intensified, particularly with the rise of the rap scene. The Magnolia and Cali Oak crews saw music as another battleground, with each neighborhood trying to claim its own place in the burgeoning hip-hop culture.
Many of the artists who came out of these areas, whether from Cash Money or No Limit, carried the weight of that rivalry with them. The streets were always a backdrop to their success, and the constant reminder of where they came from never let them forget the fierce competition that defined their rise. Collaborations between artists from the two projects were rare and often controversial, as allegiances to their neighborhoods ran deep. But it was that very tension, where art and street life collided, that helped to create the raw, unfiltered sound that came to define New Orleans hip-hop, giving it an edge and authenticity that resonated far beyond the city's borders. The rivalry between the Magnolia and Cali Oak wasn't just a footnote in the city's history. It was a fundamental part of the culture that made New Orleans music so unique.
In 2002, the darker side of the No Limit empire came to the forefront when Master P's brother, Corey Miller, aka C Murder, was arrested for the murder of a 16-year-old boy named Steve Thomas. Despite maintaining his innocence, C Murder was convicted of the crime and sentenced to life in prison. The case was full of controversy, with multiple witnesses recanting their statements and claiming they had been coerced into testifying against him. Over the years, the case would go through several retrials, and in 2018, the witnesses admitted they had lied under pressure. C Murder's story remains a tragic and unresolved chapter in the city's history. The loss of Soulja Slim. In 2003, tragedy struck the New Orleans hip-hop scene with the senseless murder of Soulja Slim, one of No Limit's most beloved stars. Slim, whose real name was James Tapp, was known for his raw, unfiltered storytelling that reflected the harsh realities of life in the streets of New Orleans. His gritty lyrics and distinctive delivery had earned him a loyal fan base, not just in the city, but across the nation. Soulja Slim's death, just outside his mother's house in the Magnolia Projects, was a huge blow to the New Orleans rap community. His murder, like many others in the city, remains unsolved to this day, adding to the ever-growing list of victims of the violence that plagued New Orleans. The loss of Soulja Slim wasn't just a personal tragedy for his family and friends. It marked the end of an era for No Limit Records. His untimely death left a void in the music world, but his legacy lived on in the music he left behind. In the years following, many in the city, particularly his fellow artists, spoke of how Slim's presence and influence shaped the sound of New Orleans rap, and how his passing served as a reminder of the violence that still loomed over the streets. For those who grew up in the projects, Soulja Slim was more than just a rapper. He was a symbol of the struggle, resilience, and authenticity that defined their lives. And his death reinforced the harsh reality that even success couldn't always shield you from the dangers of the streets. In a shocking twist, in 2023, news emerged that Terrence "Gangsta" Williams, Birdman's brother and a former member of the Cash Money crew, had been released from prison after serving 20 years of a 240-year sentence. The revelation that Williams had been cooperating with the feds, providing information about people in the Magnolia Project involved in criminal activities, sent shockwaves throughout the street community of New Orleans. Williams' release was a significant event, shaking the very foundation of the city's street culture and the ties between local hip-hop legends.
The legacy of New Orleans' Third Ward and the rivalries between the Magnolia and Cali Oak projects continue to echo through the city's music scene. The rise of No Limit and Cash Money records helped put New Orleans on the map, but it also cemented the city's reputation as a place where street politics and music were inseparable. Today, the influence of these neighborhoods can be heard in the music of artists like Lil Wayne, Master P, and others who continue to carry the torch for New Orleans hip-hop. So there you have it, the untold story of New Orleans' most dangerous and influential neighborhoods, and how they shaped the culture we know today. What do you think about the way the streets of New Orleans molded the music scene? Would you like to hear more about the newer generation of Third Ward legends? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And as always, like, subscribe, and share. Don't forget to click the next video above for more episodes on Underworld, Icons,